So today's talk is going to come in three parts. Part one, forgetting and seeing. In November of 1991, I punched a very large man at the bottom of a pile of rugby players for some minor infraction, or at least it was an infraction that I perhaps perceived as major, was probably minor. Several minutes later, that same very large player ran at me from the side and punched me in the temple, knocking me out instantly. I hit the ground. We think that's what caused the concussion that led to what 10 years later was diagnosed as a traumatic brain injury. The immediate consequences of this event were linguistic and memory. So finding words was sort of like trying to find rocks in a rock pile. I just couldn't find them. Incidentally, Spanish for some reason came slightly easier than English. I suspect our brain control folks would have something clear to say about that. What was doubly frustrating is that as I was searching through the rock pile for words, I'd forget what word I was looking for. So it was my short-term memory. There were long-term memory issues as well. I forgot most of my childhood for a couple of years at least, and didn't recognize anybody I went to school with or anybody that had been friends from childhood. So this was pretty traumatic. Not traumatic only in the physiological sense, but also traumatic in the sort of emotional and psychological sense. Re-entering the world with these linguistic and memory issues, which I was eager to do, was terrifying. The first memory I have of trying to re-enter the world, that is, re-enter the everyday world, not just one-on-one conversations, but normal social life, was a drinking game. It was college. And I remember feeling absolutely terrified. Terrified not because I thought I would forget. I knew I would forget. Terrified not because I thought I might not find the right word. I knew I wouldn't find the right word. I was terrified because the moment I sat down, I also wasn't terrified because of the quantity of alcohol I was going to have to drink for all my flaws. I was mostly terrified because, frankly, when I re-entered the world, it was seething with information. It was information overload. And I didn't know that was going to be something I was going to contend with. It came as quite a shock. It was seething with information that was communicated in more ways than I could have possibly imagined. It was seething with information that was communicated in gaze, in gesture, in body torque and position, in proxemics, how far away, how close people were. And yes, also in words, but not just words, also in tone and speed and pace. And also not just one person at a time, everybody at a time. It was like trying to jump into a moving stream that was moving very, very, very fast, faster than I could keep track of. I fled, probably more times than I can remember. I didn't mean for that to be a joke. I fled, but every time that I entered again, I got a little bit better. What didn't get better for at least 2 more years was my memory. And what didn't get better was my word identification or word location skills. What got better was my attention. I learned to attend. I had to attend. I had to try to make sense of this bombardment of information that was coming at me from all people at all times, so that I could, frankly, re-enter. All that information contained very important messages that I just didn't have, okay? Part of the memory loss meant that I actually didn't really know who I was anymore. I knew my name was Jason. I knew my name. I knew who my folks were. I knew those kinds of things, but I didn't, frankly, know who I was. Those of you who've had moments of sort of identity crisis, it was something like that wouldn't go away. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know what people thought of me. I didn't know who I was. In any given moment, I didn't know what I was supposed to do next, but I learned to pay attention. I learned to pay attention to all that information, and I learned to rejoin. And over time, I stopped having to pay attention, right? I could just re-enter the stream. I learned to pay attention to the right things and not pay attention to the wrong things. Let me back up for a second. What was terrifying when I re-entered the world was not just that it was seething with information. It's that I was cast adrift. I was unmoored. And so two things went together. As I learned to attend to some things and not others, as I learned to make sense of these messages, I found myself again, right? I became moored. I became anchored. And as I became anchored, I became more certain of what I was. I got to stop paying attention to so much. Another way to think about this is it was terrifying because anything was possible. Now, we normally hear that phrase, anything is possible, in reference to really, really good things, right? But for me, the fact that anything was possible when I entered a drinking game or a classroom or a conversation or a phone call, the fact that anything was possible was paralyzing. It was terrifying. I learned to attend. I gained myself back. But at the same time, the possibilities began to narrow. I figured out who I was. I figured out what was possible. I could track what we were doing. Over time, I got some words back too. So these three things came together, right, in the process of my recovery. I learned to stop paying attention to everything, only pay attention to some things. I learned who I was, but the possibilities for what could be began to narrow. Part 2, jazz and schooling. Really, part 2 should be called jazz versus schooling. Okay. 10 years later, 6 years later, 8 years later, something like that. That's not because of my brain injury. That'll be a running joke. I don't mean it to be, but it will be. It certainly is in our home. Several years later, I'm writing a dissertation, looking at the give and take of social interaction in classrooms, in particular one classroom where some amazing things were happening, trying to figure out how that amazing stuff happened. And I was listening to a piece of jazz, a piece called In Walked Bud, off an album called Mysterioso by Thelonious Monk. And this came just a day after I had been in a conversation with somebody who said, we're writing this paper. He said, we're writing this paper and we're trying to make sense of this mistake that another guy made, McCoy Tyner. So I had all these things going on in my head, I'm sure. I was trying to make sense of social interaction. I had all these videos. I had all these transcripts. I had this conversation that had happened before in the back of my head about finding a mistake in jazz, and I'm listening to In Walked Bud, and it goes something like dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, 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 ba-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, ba-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. And that theme repeats. About 7.5 minutes in, to my ear, Thelonious Monk hits a wrong note. Clang! And it sounds bad. But because of this conversation I just had, I felt like, hey, I've got an authorship coming. I called up Ray McDermott and I said, hey, Ray, I think I found a mistake. You can use it in your paper. Can I play? Sure, he said, let's listen to it. And it turned out it was a better mistake than the one we heard by McCoy Tyner. And it turned out the one that McCoy Tyner made, we played it for a bunch of jazz musicians, and they said, that's not a mistake at all. Don't worry about it. But that one that Thelonious Monk made, maybe. So we got somebody to transcribe this whole piece of jazz, and here's what we learned. We learned that it wasn't a mistake, or we couldn't any longer determine whether it was a mistake. What to tell? To figure out what this note was, whether or not it was a mistake, we had to listen to all the notes that came before it and all the notes that came after it, and we had to hear many, many performances. He transcribed so many performances of In Walked Bud, and this was the only time that Thelonious Monk played it this way, and we listened to it this way so many times it stopped sounding like a mistake. This one note turned out not just to not have been a mistake because of what notes had preceded it, but not to have been a mistake because of the stuff that came after it, which was unique and interesting and innovative. He never played it like that before, and he never played it again, but it sounded amazing. So what's the story there? Yeah, there was a stream. There was a stream of activity. In this case, not a stream of people interacting, but a stream of musical notes, right? A stream of musical notes. And here, it wasn't just that the story is different than my story, which is that as I learned to engage, the possibilities narrowed, I got secure, I figured out who I was, and I started finding words again. In this case, there was a stream of activity and then a detour. He played a note and something interesting happened. So it had felt like my regaining some certainty and some anchoring and became moored again was suddenly disrupted. Disrupted not because I got another brain injury, but disrupted because I heard a departure from the normal, and suddenly possibilities began opening up, and I started listening for these kinds of notes in all kinds of pieces of jazz, and incidentally, inside of the videos that I was working on of classrooms. And that's where the story got sad. Because inside of classrooms, over and over and over and over and over again, whenever there's a note that doesn't sound just like the notes that came before, and that doesn't move into expected notes that we know should come next, it gets called a mistake, and nobody seeks to analyze it. Nobody asks what's going on. They say, that's a mistake. Wrong answer. Who has the right answer? We have this marvelous video of a kid, his teacher's reading a book, and the book's about this mitten. And there's one page in the book where a kid has a mitten and in the book, and he finds the mitten blows up because all these animals, it's a kid's book, all these animals go inside of it, and every page is a new animal goes inside of it, and they can't fit, and the mitten breaks apart, and the boy goes back because he's the one who lost the mitten, and he goes back into the forest on a snowy day, and he sees a part of the mitten, and it's the thumb, and a kid says, in this video we have, the teacher says, and what did he see? Talking about the kid in the book, and one of our students says, he raises his hand, and he doesn't raise his hand, which is maybe part of the problem, he says, he sees a mitten. And the teacher goes, did he see a mitten? Guess what the rest of the class did? Any guesses? I'll do it again. Did he see a mitten? It's so good, we'll give it to you twice. Did he see a mitten? And what do you think the rest of the students said? No. No, they didn't just say no, they went, no! And one little girl who was about to give an answer went like this. And this happened over and over and over again. Things were maybe just not quite exactly right. These possible wrong notes, these possible different notes that might have opened up some possibility. Guess what happened? They got shut down as wrong. And it felt secure. Everybody knew it was totally predictable. Possibilities narrowed. But oh wait, the possibilities narrowed. And the more and more we looked, we got sad about what we were seeing in classrooms. Everything that didn't move someone forward faster along the track that was predetermined for them, so much of those things that were good ideas or good questions or good possibilities got treated as wrong answers, detours we don't have time for, misunderstandings, or at worst, signs of maybe some underlying disability. My daughter's school, they were deciding whether or not to move a small group of students up for the afternoon. My daughter and her friend were sitting around the dining room table, it's kitchen table, and I overheard them saying, so who do you think is going to get moved up? I'm a researcher, so I pressed record on my phone. And I said, what? Who's going to get moved up? I repeated the question to make sure it got recorded, and she said, that's another thing that we do. And she said, well, who's smart? It's the person who's smart. They're the ones who are going to get moved up. I said, who's smart? Who's that? It's the people, and she looked at me like I was crazy. She and her friend both. It's the people who are fast. It's the people who are fast. Over and over and over again, what we see in school is that the stuff that doesn't make you go faster is stuff you should avoid. The stuff that slows you down is stuff you should avoid. The stuff that gets you off track is stuff you should avoid. Even worse, if your question or your idea or your what if takes you off the track of the whole class, right? Don't slow us down. If it goes there's another thing, by the way, that if it goes too fast, what's the answer? We'll get to that next year. Not like jazz. Can you imagine jazz being understood like that? Faster. Fast enough? Can you imagine if every time that a musician played a note that just sounded just a little bit different, the band stopped and was like, I don't think so. That's not what was written here. Or if worse, the band leader stopped the band and said, was that the right note? The worst. School seems more like a race, and what happens in a race? What do you attend to? I'm trying to bring some of this back from the story of my dumb idea to punch a guy that was a lot bigger than I am. In school, what we learn to attend to is a very narrow set of possibilities. Who's fast, who's slow, who's up, who's down, who's following the teacher's directions, who's smart, who's dumb. Who's got the right answer, who doesn't? Oh, by the way, you got to have the right answer first. Remember that? You remember that from school. I'll prove it to you. What do you think happens when 10 kids raise their hand and the first kid has the right answer? What do the rest of the hands do? They go down and they sound just like this. Oh, that was my answer. What do we attend to? We attend to who's got the one answer first, right? Fastest. That's the smartest. They're the ones that are going to get moved up in the afternoon, and those are probably the ones that are going to win the race. We don't even hear the possibilities of detours. We don't even hear the possibilities that are present in one note, especially if it doesn't come at the right time. We just don't even know how to pay attention to it. We just don't hear it. The word for this out of jazz, I don't know if it comes out of jazz, but it came out of a great jazz writer writing the obituary for a drummer named Barney Kessel. Drummer, bassist, named Barney Kessel in the LA Times. The other jazz musicians talked about Barney Kessel as having big ears. I like that. Big ears. And when they said, what do you mean? It was another jazz phrase. What do you mean big ears? So he could hear around corners. That's nice, right? We don't know how to listen like that when we get kids in school. Our ears are small, little. We got little teeny ears. We don't hear around corners. There are no corners. There's only straight lines. Sir Ken Robinson, the most popular TED Talk of all time, over 23 million views. He says, schools kill creativity. Do you know why it's got 23 million views? Because he's half 100% right. Because we all feel it, don't we? We all feel it. When we talk about school, we want schools to meet standards, to meet expectations, but when we get our own kids into school, we worry. We don't want our child's creativity. We want innovation to get killed. We don't want good ideas to get killed. And we feel that that's what's happening. Even those of us who are thrilled that our children are up at the top worry that what's happening is that schools are killing creativity. Those of us with money, what do? We put our kids in after-school programs that keep it alive, that cultivate that creativity. Ken Robinson, at 23 million views, is half 100% right. He's right in his complaint. He's wrong in his diagnosis. Schools don't kill creativity. We do. Because we've learned not to hear. Because we're no longer alive and alert to the possibilities for learning that are there before they emerge. They're there in one or two small notes or ideas at a time. They're there when a kid says, what if? They're there when a kid's sitting at a lab and says, I wonder what would happen if we tried. Did you notice that? They're there, but we don't know how to hear them. Schools don't kill creativity. We do. We do when we get the homework sheet back from school with a grade on it, and instead of asking, what were you thinking about? We say, what happened with that? Why are you getting a 75 on this? I do it too, by the way. You got 95s on your last 3 quizzes. Why is this one a 60? You better ask the teacher to retake this. It didn't even occur to me to say, what were you thinking in the answers that you gave? Because my ears have shrunk. I spent 20 years trying to regain the thing I lost in my recovery. Not to try to regain the memory and the words that I lost. I got that back. But try to regain the thing that I lost, or a piece of the thing that I lost in my recovery. What I lost was the quality of attention that allowed me to hear more than I had learned to hear, that broke the habits of attention, right? That I could hear. There was just a lot more information coming in. I had a lot more to think about. It was overwhelming. I don't wish it on anybody. But I spent 20 years trying to figure out how to get some of it back. Not just how to get some of it back for me, to try to get some of it back for our teachers. I currently spend a bunch of my time educating teachers. There's a couple of them here. I think we've got teacher education wrong, or not right enough, if what we worry about is only the acquisition of skill, if we only worry about creating teachers who inspire, if we only think about trying to get the teacher, we ought to get the teachers up there doing methane gas bubbles. Damn right. We should. But if that's what we think learning to teach is, we haven't done enough. We should teach our teachers to stand up and give an engaging presentation, whatever that means. We should teach our teachers to do hands-on work. We should get our teachers to design lessons that are awesome. But we also have to get our teachers to learn to see and to hear. The work of teaching is education of attention. That's the object of teacher education. That's what we have to learn. And the challenge is for us to do that with teachers, just like it would be for any of us. It's not just aspiring teachers that have this problem, it's all of us. Learning to attend means unlearning, right, the stuff we've already learned. What does that mean? What do I mean by that? It means that we've got to unlearn our habits of seeing a different answer as a wrong answer, to seeing the unexpected as a threat, to seeing uncertain pathways as somehow problematic. We've got to have it all mapped out in advance. Miles Davis, this is glorious. These are pictures of Miles Davis while he was producing with his quintet the phenomenal album, Kind of Blue. Okay? This is him leaning over the back. I want you to think about Miles Davis as an ideal teacher in this case, right? Leaning over the back of Bill Evans. Maybe, I don't know what he's doing, but it's maybe instructive. Playing with the band, right? Playing, asking. Look at that look that Miles Davis. Do you see that look? What do you think? You see? I can hear him going. What do you see this? But also, some big ears. Do you know what made Kind of Blue? It's not Miles Davis being able to shift from being an instructor to being over the shoulder to being a player to being... We ought to have teachers that do all those things. But you know how he knew it worked? How he knew what was possible? How he could find the notes that would make it something that nobody had ever recorded before? He had big ears. No, he didn't. He didn't really have big ears. It's a figure of speech. He could hear around corners. I'm sure of it. This part 3 is end teaching. So what do we want? I'll tell you what I want. I want a teacher for my daughters and son who can hear an idea maybe even before my child has it. Oh, my child pushes just a little something interesting up instead of saying, not right now, we don't have time, I don't think that's the place. Raise your hand first. Are you sitting down? Did you take your meds? Hussein said, say more. It doesn't have to be all the time. I get it. The classes have to go on. We got to get things done. Say a little more. I want to know more about what you just said. Everybody listening? Not only big ears, the teacher, but get all the kids to have big ears too and start listening to each other and being open to what's possible. We've got to stop running schools like a race, gang. And the way to do that is not just to tear down the race courses, because I guarantee you, if we tear down the schools and ask to rebuild it from scratch, we're going to rebuild the same damn thing. You know how I know? I know because when my daughter does come home from school and to play school, what does she do? Sit down, I'll sit here, I'll read you a book. Raise your hand, please. Because if we start from scratch, we're going to remake the same things we've always made because we're going to be seeing and hearing and looking for and listening for the same thing we've always looked for and listened for, which is who's fast, who's got the right answer, etc. We have to learn to hear and see something different. We have to re-educate our attention. How do we do it? I think that's the next talk. Not the next talk today. The next talk that I'll give another day. Thanks.